welcome to another episode of the Access Vikings podcast. I'm Emily Leiker, joined by Andrew Krammer and Ben Goessling, all of us of the Minnesota Star Tribune. And you guys, OTAs have started. We were out there for our first day at organized team activities yesterday. The Vikings started on Tuesday following Memorial Day weekend. And as it feels like most days that we go watch practice this spring and then do a podcast, the big takeaways are all about quarterback J.J. McCarthy, right? So, Andrew, you wrote yesterday about McCarthy's day, what he went through. We're very locked in on what he was doing all day. So just kind of give us a synopsis of what his practice day looked like and what stood out to you most.
Yeah, absolutely. And this stage of their development is pretty limited, as we all know. In OTAs, there's no pads, there's no hitting, none of that. But J.J. McCarthy is throwing to Justin Jefferson. He probably did more throwing to Jefferson on Wednesday that we saw than he did his entire summer last year. And he was asked afterward, how often did you throw to Justin last year? And he just said, well, I think it's not as much as I am now. And that's just a very diplomatic way of saying he was with the third team last year this time. And now he's getting this really full indoctrination into the offense. And I found it fascinating to listen to Kevin O'Connell talk about their approach with him, a no stone unturned approach in which they're not trying to assume that he recalls everything from their weekly game planning meetings or his summer up till August 10th with that injury. But he was throwing the ball well. He looked physically great. Didn't look like he had any limitations that way, but he talked about the above the neck, the mental kind of strain that the Vikings coaching staff is trying to put on him right now. And Ben, we know from seeing Sam Darnold go through this last year, just how difficult this can be for anybody who's even Darnold, who's in his sixth year in the NFL, let alone McCarthy, who's going to be in his second year now. So it was just interesting to see him kind of have some struggles. He threw an interception on his first pass of 7-on-7. Dwight McGlothern batted away another ball later. So Kevin O'Connell was saying, hey, let's not get too carried away with the, counting reps or counting completions or whatever. Let's just try to kind of enjoy the process, as he says.
Yes, the process, which conveniently enough began with J.J. McCarthy throwing the ball seconds after the shooting period for reporters and camera folks in attendance ended. Sure, it was just a coincidence, but what we saw but did not document for video consumption, he certainly, the arm is there. I thought, had a number of nice throws over the middle, particularly. A couple of darts over the middle to Jordan Addison. I think he had a post to Jalen Naylor that was awfully nice. So a lot of those things where he puts plenty of steam on the ball, I thought were in full display. The question with him is always, is he able to put enough touch on the ball to kind of be able to fit it into zones and figure out how to handle all of those things when it's more complex at the NFL level. And he is getting tested in that area already by Brian Flores, who's throwing lots of different looks at him and is not really standing down for the second-year quarterback to give him an easy introduction, which JJ talked about is actually helpful because it makes it easier once he sees other defenses that are not quite as complex, not quite as adaptable as this Vikings scheme is. And we've talked about this a lot over the years with, Kirk Cousins talked about this quite a bit. I think the famous Kirk Cousins chucking the football into the street behind the Vikings practice facility. I think that was a Flores-induced frustration, wasn't it? Or was that further back than that?
Boy, I think that was 2023. I think it was his first year.
I feel like it was Flores prompted where he just decided enough of this. I'm going to huck the ball into O'Neill Drive behind the Vikings practice facilities, just out of just letting off a little bit of steam. So, he has said that was a frustrating thing for him. It was hard to get used to practicing like that. And I know Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores have a lot of discussions about, okay, how much do we balance out pressing and testing an offense because we're trying to get done what we want to get done versus, saying, hey, the offense needs to install some things here and needs to have some reps that are going to be productive. So O'Connell says they have basically what are called dealer's choice periods where they can kind of say, we're trying to get this done. Can you be a little more accommodating here? And that's probably true for the offense too, in terms of motion and different things they would throw to be confusing for the defense. So a lot of those things are in play early. It's early in camp, and it also means, as McCarthy talked about, you can try some things that you might not try in a game. You'll hear pitchers talk about this all the time in spring training. If I was working on, throwing a curveball in this count, which I normally wouldn't throw in the regular season, but this is the time to work on things. So as O'Connell sort of in jest implied, the breathless counting, parsing, analyzing, interpreting, searching for greater meaning in the universe about each one of these reps is probably not necessary at this time of year. So I think we saw a lot of good things, a lot of what they've liked about him, and some things that he's going to have to continue to work on. It was very much an OTA in May yesterday that we saw.
Andrew, I think this made me think of you, me, and Lindsey Young were talking at one point yesterday, I think during that first 7-on-7 period where the defense did make quite a few plays. And we were like, it's always funny watching OTAs or like practices. Obviously, I had a similar situation watching like spring football when I was covering college, where you're like, is the defense just really good and is like making plays on the offense, or is the offense having a rough day, or is the defense just having a really good day? And that's kind of just what all of training camp is. And to O'Connell's point, it's like we see these things and you really just have to take them at like face value of, okay, today JJ threw this many passes, whatever, and not like extrapolate necessarily like value from them.
Yeah, and I did think it was worth noting that the defense was pretty fired up. They were ripping balls out of receivers' hands when they were just standing around after plays or right as plays ended. Like we mentioned, there were the 2 deflections early, and then suddenly the tempo, and not suddenly, but the tempo did seem to get scaled back a little bit, or at least the excitement or spiritedness of the practice, and the back half of it, including the ending hurry up drill, were very like half speed, half tempo. McCarthy talked about kind of getting through his reads and trying to focus on that timing, even though they're not going full speed. So yeah, there's just a lot that they're working on, those intricacies that never get talked about in the public, for the most part, all the million little things that need to get pieced together to create that eventual touchdown play come week 1. And we're so far away from, as we're talking about, we're so far away from those guys strapping it up and going full speed, and us being able to say, yes, this looks good or bad.
The other person that we heard that JJ's been spending a lot of time with besides Justin Jefferson is obviously center Ryan Kelly. We just heard a little bit about that. Sounds like he and Ryan have met with Coach Chris Cooper a couple times, just kind of going over different things. I guess, Ben, can we talk a little bit about the importance of that relationship between the two of them, especially too when this O-line in OTAs is in kind of flux because there are some guys missing?
Yeah, I mean, Will Fries was not out there yesterday, which we expected. I mean, he's coming off that tibia fracture, and my understanding is he'd had, when he had that injury, I think it was last October, week 5 with the Colts, it was a massive surgery to get things back together. So there's been this question of, did he have a setback? And I've had people ask me this on social media. No, I don't think he did. I think it's just he had a lot of hardware in there keeping everything together. So eventually, when things heal, you have to get all of that taken out. And my understanding is that's, some of what he's had done in the last few weeks here, just, kind of normal stuff to get screws and pins and all of that kind of stuff out as he heals. So, that does take some time. I mean, Kevin O'Connell said yesterday he doesn't expect Will Fries will be out there, which does mean that it looks different. You had Blake Brandell at right guard for a lot of it, or Donovan Jackson, the rookie left guard that I think McCarthy called Don at one point.
Donnie? Yeah.
Okay. I don't know about that one yet, but we'll see. Maybe it'll grow. I don't know. It's always like calling Harrison Smith Harry. It's always it's like, it sounds like we're running a bowling team in 1974 or something. But yeah, it is a little bit in flux, which does make it more important for Ryan Kelly, because we've heard a lot about this over the years when Garrett Bradbury was here, that center that can set protections and be a second set of eyes for a young quarterback or a quarterback that's new to an offense is especially important. And there was a lot of that was on Garrett Bradbury's plate last year in a way that it probably was not before, because you had a new quarterback in the offense in Sam Darnold, and you had one that probably wasn't quite as encyclopedic in his knowledge of defensive fronts and his ability to do it on his own like Kirk Cousins could. So there was less freedom for Sam Darnold, or at least more of a help system in place for Sam Darnold, that, a center had a little more input, or maybe a little more override and at times than would have been necessary with Kirk Cousins. With a young quarterback, that's especially important, because teams are going to try to throw things at J.J. McCarthy that he's probably not ready for, doesn't know how to handle. So that center that has seen a lot and can say, hey, this is what they're trying to do here, we need to change this protection to this. And to have that trust from your quarterback of, yes, I'm going to make this call if we have 3 seconds to make a decision here on a protection adjustment, I'm making the call and I need you to trust me that this is the right call, because we don't have time to argue about this or have time to figure out what we want. So it is a little bit of a pitcher and catcher thing. You talk a lot about the battery there. I think it's my second baseball reference to this podcast, I think, but it's important for that relationship to be good, because there has to be enough trust in that battery that everything works well together.
I remember part of Kirk's frustration when he signed with the Vikings was, remember where they went through like 4 different centers his first training camp because of various injuries. I think Bradbury was in the mix, but not available right away for whatever reason. And they were just churning through guys. And I think
the butt sweat.
That's right. And the posterior sweat that Kirk liked to talk about, or at least wasn't afraid to talk about.
Yes, posterior perspiration.
Regarding centers. But yeah, it's an incredibly important relationship, and one that is probably the second most important on the field, short of JJ and the other JJ, Justin Jefferson, who we see there practicing, participating. Kevin O'Connell mentioned that he's been there for at least since phase 2, which had been a couple weeks. We saw McCarthy and Jefferson attend the May 14th Wolves Warriors game together, sat courtside for that one. So, I mean, at least they don't have everybody there, at least didn't on Wednesday when we watched, but they've got the main characters there and the guys who really need to start forming these bonds, namely the 3 that we just talked about.
Yeah, before we talk more about attendance, the big takeaway from that mic'd up session between Jefferson and McCarthy was that JJ had never had Mike and Ike's before. What's our take on Mike and Ike's? Official Access Vikings stance on Mike and Ike's.
I like them. I mean, they wouldn't be like a candy I would reach for all the time if I'm going through the movie theater candy aisle at the grocery store or at the gas station, but if they're there, I will eat them. I'm not anti Mike and Ike's. It just probably wouldn't be quite at the top of my list. It's a serviceable candy.
Yeah, it's not my favorite. I'm more of a chocolate guy if I'm going candy, but the fact that they get stuck in your teeth too much, that's what really gets me. You know, the chewy kind of sugary candy, I can't do too much of it. So I think JJ's Pearly Whites might be because he hasn't had Mike and Ike's.
Yeah. I'm a child of the 90s too, where it's like it was before Invisalign. So like, you can't eat all this chewy candy. It's going to affect your braces. So I grew up with a lot of that in the back of my mind. So probably still like I had somebody hand me dots the other day. I was at a track meet and another coach had dots. They're like, hey, do you want some of these? And I'm like, am I allowed to have these? 14-year-old me thinks I'm going to get in trouble with the ortho appointment. So there's still maybe a little bit of that in the back of my mind too.
I always think of Mike and Ike's being in like those like machines where you put the 25 cents in and then like twist it. Like I feel like Mike and Ike's are a very popular candy. Is there a formal name for those machines? I feel like Ben's giving me a look that's like child who doesn't know things.
We should give Random McDaniel's take on Mike and Ike's.
Random McDonald.
Mike and Ike's partially approved on this podcast. We were just talking about absences and who was there, who wasn't a little bit.
Wait, hang on. So the spirally thing, you just talking about a vending machine, right?
No, not a vending machine. The like,
we'll like the ones that have that they're all in the thing that turns
like it's just and you get them like loose in your hand or in like a little cup.
Oh, I got
like bouncy balls too.
Yeah,
bouncy balls,
I know what you're talking about. You put a quarter, you turn them. Yeah, I don't know what the official name of those things is, but yes, where you get them at the grocery store. Yes.
Good. I'm glad that wasn't a Gen Z not knowing moment.
No, I was just having a senior moment, not understanding what you were talking about.
We just need to get JJ McCarthy with us and all go to find one of those things and get him some Mike and Ike's. Clearly, that's the idea.
We'll enjoy them together. Other notable absences yesterday, we did not see Josh Metellus, though we did go back and look at the photos and stuff from OTAs day 1 that Vikings posted. He was there on Tuesday. So not really any concern there. He probably just had something pop up, but we did not see him yesterday. We did not see Isaiah Rodgers either yesterday. I don't know if we ended up finding him in photos from day 1. Those were the 2 kind of non-injury guys that we were like, hey, why aren't these guys here? Christian Darrisaw, obviously similar situation to Will Fries, where he's still kind of working through his knee injury from last year. And we had expected not to see him much this spring. I don't think the door was completely closed when we asked O'Connell about it last, but it was not a surprise to not see him out there yesterday.
No, it wasn't. And if you look at that, if you take the timeline that Hawkinson had, he kept referencing 9 months when he spoke, and then it took him about 10 to get back on the field. So for Darisaw, that's right in that start of training camp through end of August kind of window, which would make the most sense. And then I thought it was noteworthy that we saw, and it's only May, but we saw Jonathan Allen, we saw Javon Hargrave coming off injuries. Both were out there. We saw Mekhi Blackman, who Kevin O'Connell said would be out there, was out there. But yet in this learning and teaching phase that O'Connell keeps referencing, it was more like Jeff Okudah, who kept getting a bunch of reps with a new defense under a new coordinator. It was Dwight McGlothern, a second-year guy coming back, getting a lot of reps as well. So we saw a lot of guys mixing in there, but I thought it was noteworthy that Mekhi seems to be doing well and coming back and should be primed to compete for quite the role here this summer.
Yeah, we were going to talk a little bit about position battles. I feel like cornerback was where my eye just naturally went yesterday, trying to figure out who was rotating in there. And it did seem, again, without Isaiah Rodgers there, who we know the Vikings think more highly of than the media did when they brought him in. So we're kind of waiting to see that there. But without Isaiah Rodgers, it was Byron Murphy and Jeff Okudah starting most of the time. Starting in loose terms, obviously. And then Dwight McGlothern was that second rotation in, and Mekhi Blackman was that third. I felt like he did a little less in those team portions, like that 7-on-7, but he was fully involved in all the drills and stuff like that. What other positions besides cornerback do we think maybe there's going to be a little juice, if not in OTAs, then once we get to training camp in August?
I think wide receiver, Ben. That seems to be a spot to me that'd be pretty interesting. It seemed like Jay-Sean Jones, he was undrafted last year out of Maryland, Ty Felton's former teammate. He was getting a lot of run yesterday. But they got Naylor back, and he's number one now. Vikings fans need to adjust for that. So they got the top three options back, but after losing Powell and Sherfield, they need a new punt returner, and Naylor, Silas Bolden, Dante Fleming, and Miles Price were the four fielding punts. So there's going to be somebody new, most likely. And if it's Naylor, Vikings fans are going to remember Lambeau Field all too well and what went wrong there the last time he did that. So that competition.
Out there. Another baseball reference. Just going to keep going with it.
Anyway, so I do think that punt returner job is going to be. You threw me off, Ben. The punt returner job is going to help determine that stuff. Special teams always does. So
I got you daydreaming about how much you love baseball, didn't I?
Yep, exactly.
I know my audience.
But wide receiver is going to be one to watch for me for sure.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think we don't see. The other one to mention, we didn't see Rondale Moore, which we don't expect to see going through here.
He was there, but he was in street clothes.
Correct. Yes, he was there, but he was watching. Yes, he was present, but not practicing. So, I mean, that one I think is the wide receiver thing is going to be interesting. I'm just curious too, with the offensive line, how this is going to go, because we have seen them be cautious with rookies over time. In past years about how soon they put a guy in the lineup. I thought to see, and again, some of this is probably injury timeline, but I thought the fact that they had Donovan Jackson in there with the first team this early on was somewhat noteworthy. And again, you have to attach the asterisks to it because Fries is not there, which means Brandell is on the right side, but they probably could have configured something else if they were concerned, as they sometimes are, about putting a guy in the first team that early, especially at times where the media is present. I think they understand, as much as Kevin O'Connell jokes about it, I think he jokes about it because he understands that all of these things get analyzed at a high level. Well, they get analyzed frequently, whether they're analyzed at a high level. The quantity of the analysis is high, I should say that way. The quality of it is another conversation. But the fact that he was out there this early, I think kind of squares with, I mean, he's talked about him probably being the left guard. He's hinted at it a little more than I would think you would hear him do with a lot of rookies. And the level of this needs to change that we heard from the head coach at the end of the season and a little bit as they got into the draft too. I thought this kind of followed that timeline. It doesn't seem like they are worried about putting him in there too early, because I think they feel like he is going to be an upgrade. And it does give you a little more of the benefit of Brandel, maybe where he's better off, where he is versatile enough to play a number of spots. You can plug him in just about anywhere that you need to do it and say, we can get a serviceable performance from this guy. So I think that's probably some of how Brandel will be used at this point. But the fact that Jackson was in there, I thought was interesting and probably telling for what we're going to see going forward. It doesn't seem like they're holding back on his development in terms of being the starter.
Yeah, and Brandel's the veteran guy, but it was telling that they put Jackson at left guard and told Brandel to move. Like, hey, you're the one who's going to go replace Fries, and we're going to put the rookie at the spot that we envision him being in.
Do you think, well, with that, do you think it's more like a comfortability thing with like, let's start Donovan Jackson at left guard for now because he played there in college? Or do you think it's like, yes, we see him only there and not on the right side?
I mean, he showed in college he's not uncomfortable moving. I mean, that was obviously the thing that got a lot of attention in the draft process when he moved to left tackle. But I mean, yeah, moving to the right side is obviously a different thing too. And you'll hear different people talk about how big of a deal is it really. Some will say no, it actually is a very big deal because you're doing everything backwards now. So some of it might have been that. But I just think that if they were worried about the implication that, hey, he's going to be the starter, because I think they know that when it gets out that he was with the first team at left guard, whether it's things that we report, whether it's things they put on their own website where people will kind of parse through the photos of the video, and that stuff is going to be there. So I think if they were trying to avoid that, I'll put it this way, they're at least not concerned enough about it to try and avoid it. They're not concerned enough about it to come up with another solution to manage optics. So that I think is interesting, just in the sense of they must feel good enough about it to say, we're not going to worry about all these little other things and how that may affect the process.
Yeah, and it all tracks because, I mean, you don't draft a first-round guard unless he's going to be starting at some point. But if they had envisioned him to have a backup role right away, you might want to start cross-training him, as they often want their backup guard to know both. And so for them to do that with Brandel at this point would point to us the kind of obvious that Brandel is eventually going to be that backup behind Jackson and Fries.
Yeah, and that was something that O'Connell brought up talking about the O-line yesterday, right? Was that you potentially leave OTAs having 3 or 4 guys who can move around, jump positions, especially in a circumstance like this where they are missing guys that they know will be in their starting lineup or they expect to be in their starting lineup, like Fries and Darisaw. And so I think they see a lot of benefit in having the optionality to steal one of Kevin O'Connell's phrases to move those guys around and do stuff there. Let's end our OTAs section with, what was everyone's less serious, maybe more silly takeaway, story, stat moment from OTAs yesterday?
So I'll share one. I was standing off on the side, just on the sideline, and you're kind of near a lot of the drills with a lot of the pass rushers, I guess it was. So Jonathan Grenard is standing there, and they're in, I think it was 7-on-7. And Grenard says, I'm going to call the play. He's either going to throw to 18 or 3 or 1 or 33 or maybe to 87. And he is not the next Tony Romo. In other words, Tony Romo in his early days as an announcer. He was, just having fun with it. But It was interesting that I think he's joking around for a minute, and then I think somebody almost picked off a pass, and he was the first guy kind of off the sideline yelling, trying to get the energy going. So there is, I mean, as Andrew mentioned, there's a fair amount of fire from this defense. And I think that's something they've had to figure out, like I talk about with O'Connell and Brian Flores, of how much are we trying to make each other better by going at it and sharpening each other that way? Or how much are we making each other better by saying, let's give you a look here that you actually can work against and try to run things against? So there's a fair amount of that competitiveness with that defense. And I think a lot of that they probably take from their defensive coordinator. They take a lot of their identity from him. But yeah, just kind of a funny moment there that interrupted kind of some witty banter as Jonathan Grenard is, I don't think he was obviously trying to call the play, but he did predict there was going to be a check down, I think, somewhere in there. So, in that kind of thing, it's probably That's a safe bet. But yeah, he's not the next Tony Romo, I would put that.
He was very vocal throughout all of yesterday's practice because they were on that same sideline where we watch from. And like, I feel like every 5-10 minutes I was like looking over because he was saying something, shouting at Dallas Turner and stuff. Obviously one of his his mentees. But yeah, that's a fun one, Ben.
I was just going to say that there was at one point where he just yelled like from 20, 30 yards away, just hi Dallas, as Dallas is like, practicing like in the middle of an 11-on-11 rep, just trying to shout out, hey buddy, what's up? The one I'd have to go to is McCarthy getting asked at the end of the day, how far have you ever figured out how far you can throw it? Like he's Uncle Rico trying to hook it over them mountains in Napoleon Dynamite.
Yep.
JJ handled it though. And that dude he's incredibly impressive as a presence for a 22-year-old because he handles everything. No matter what question's coming at him, he just handles it incredibly well. And he handled that very well too. And just talked about his 75, 80 yards, but the wind was helping me that day. The wind was helping me. So,
well, the follow-up question was, does the wind affect it? Like, yeah. The wind's blowing out, the ball flies farther. It's it happens in baseball a lot. I'm just going to keep rolling with it.
That might be one where I have to splice in the actual audio and the answer because it was just incredible. Like, boys, he's like getting thrown serious questions
as we're paraphrasing it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it was more the context of, you're right. We were throwing all these serious, like, you're back from the knee injury, you're bonding with Justin Jefferson, you're the quarterback of the Vikings, and suddenly it was like, how far can you chuck it?
Yeah.
Have you ever tested that before?
Yeah.
Like the guy was a quarterback in high school. Do you think he's tested it? I would almost guarantee you he has.
Yeah, it feels almost a guarantee.
It was a teenager with a strong arm and testosterone. I would almost guarantee you he has tested how far he could throw it.
That was funny. That was good.
I'll throw out two. One being a similar McCarthy story is that, Ben, you weren't standing with us, but Andrew and I were standing together, and knowing that Andrew was going to do like a detailed takeaway of what JJ's day had looked like, we were like time stamping like everything from practice. It'd be like JJ picks up water bottle, 12:51 p.m.
Not quite that, but like we were doing like first Justin Jefferson, first pass to JJ, first catch to J, or whatever. Just not stuff that, and 99% of the stuff came nowhere near the story. It was just doing like, oh man, if we do like a minute by minute log, I bet you Vikings fans are going to eat this up. Even though, as Kevin O'Connell will tell you, there's not a whole lot to take away from that. So that's how we ended up setting up the story of like, here's O'Connell's warning, and then here's everything you can read too much into. But yeah, I think it was 12:51 was the first full team completion to JJ. So Vikings fans, just so you know, where were you at 12:51?
6 minutes after that. It was 6 minutes between the first completion to JJ and that interception that came at the start of 7 seconds, right. I think.
The Byron Murphy tip, Ivan Pace pick, and then I think a lateral, the Harrison Smith at the end of it, if I remember correctly.
Some flair.
Maybe.
Some flair.
They were throwing some stuff in there. Yeah. My other was going to be that we saw 6'7" defensive lineman Alexander Williams walking around, and he looked straight out of an action movie. Just like insane build. He was not practicing. He was just kind of off to the side, but Lindsey Young had told us to look out for him when he came in the building, and we obviously were taking attendance and had thought we saw him, and then he walked in and we were like, oh no, we didn't see him because we would have noticed him when he walked in the room. So we'll see if he practices at all and see what that looks like. But those are our fun OTA takeaways. Ben, let's wrap up with your writing something interesting for that. You always write something interesting for the Access Vikings newsletter, but this week I think it's of particular interest. So will you just share a little bit about what the focus of this week's newsletter is?
Yeah. So Roger Goodell last week, obviously the spring meetings were in Eagan. I think the two of you were covering those while I was off last week, but Roger Goodell wrapped that up in his press conference. I think he got asked a question about, are you talking about an 18th game? And he pivoted from that to say, no, actually what we talked more about was the integrity of the salary cap structure and how all of this comes together, what our priorities might be in future collective bargaining. And he talked about owners saying the costs have gone up with stadiums and just operations in general and all of those kinds of things. And, I think any business owner probably has made this sort of lament over the last few years that things are just more expensive. Part of the reason things are more expensive is the salary cap has gone up, which is part of the way the NFL CBA is aligned. The players get a certain percentage of the league's revenues, and the league is making a lot of money because of the TV contracts. I think the cap, since it came back from the dip in 2021, it's gone up like $81 million I guess it's $81 million in net increases from pre-pandemic levels. So if you put in the dip in 21 and then brought this in, I think it's like 97 million or something like that it's gone up. So all of this TV money is coming in. Everybody's getting more cash. The cap is going up. But the other thing that you can do is spend cash over cap if you want to do it. And void years became a big thing during COVID as everybody was trying to figure out how the heck do we take these existing contracts that we have and match them against a cap that has now gone down. And then the league has had all this TV money come in. So when the cap goes up every year, void years basically become, I'm borrowing from the future to pay for the present. And if the cap goes up every year, I'm basically taking an interest-free loan from my future that doesn't really matter because there's going to be enough money anyway. So what that's created is teams that have owners that are willing to spend above the cap and can figure out how to work the accounting of it, which everybody's got a guy that can figure out how to work the accounting. The Vikings have one of the best in Rob Brzezinski. They also have owners that have said repeatedly, we will spend whatever it takes to have a winner, whether that's facilities, whether that's US Bank Stadium, whether that's the roster. Looked that up this morning. They, I think, have $362 million in cash committed to this year's roster. That is the most in the league by $19 million. And it is, I think the cash over cap figure is like 25%, which is the third highest in the league. So in other words, the Vikings are using this system in a way that has helped them out a lot. I asked Rob Brzezinski about this last December when I was doing my story on the Wilfs, the 20 years owning the team. He said it is 100% a competitive advantage the way that they are willing to spend cash above the cap because it allows you to have a roster that's full of talent. So if this were to change, this wouldn't change for 5 years, but it is very much worth keeping in mind because the Vikings are one of the teams that games this system, which is entirely legal. It is entirely set up to go this way, but they use it in a way that some other teams do not. And I do wonder how much there are NFL owners saying, hey, this is creating an imbalance, or it's I want to keep more of my profits. I don't want to share as many of them with the players. So the newsletter, the main section of the newsletter is kind of a deep dive into that. I just thought it was interesting that came up, especially when it was in the Vikings' backyard. And the Vikings are one of the teams that uses this the most aggressively. Mm-hmm. It's nothing to flip out about now because we'll see what happens in 5 years when the CBA comes up. But if the commissioner is taking the time to pivot to that topic now, it seems likely that he wants to introduce it into the public conversation. I don't think that was an accident. And he said there was a lot of discussion from the owners about some of these things. So my guess is he was probably in a closed door room and said, I'm going to go out there and bring this up to get this in the public conversation. So the fact that that's happening, I think is pretty interesting. And it's certainly worth keeping in mind because it will have an effect on the Vikings if it goes into effect in a few years. It's right around the time that J.J. McCarthy would start his second contract. So a lot of it is digging into that and kind of what that could mean.
Yeah, and Ben, it was fascinating to hear Goodell mention, no, we didn't talk about an 18-game schedule. That never even came up. But we did talk about the salary cap integrity paired with cost control, the rising costs of operating our stadiums and our teams. Mm-hmm. So the Wilfs are acting as this, to keep your analogy going, this baseball owner who's like, I'm just going to keep spending to put the best talent on the field. And the rest of the NFL owners are saying, we have a cap for a reason, guys. We don't want to keep spending money like this. And I'm sure that the rest of the owners, not the rest, but I'm sure a good chunk of owners are not looking to spend cash over, hand over fist like the Wilfs do.
Right.
They don't want to be spilling all this money over the bar. And so they're trying to compete with a team like the Vikings who are, and it would seem that the rest of the NFL would be lined against the Vikings on this, whereas like you just talked about, the Vikings are willing to spend that money.
And this is something that's probably worth looking at over life cycles too. I mean, I looked at this morning at the teams that have the lowest cash numbers right now. It is the Seahawks, the Rams, the Jets, and the Packers. Not in that order, but those are the bottom four. And there are going to be different things at different life cycles of a roster, certainly. But, the Seahawks just paid Sam Darnold. That's not a huge expenditure in the grand scheme of what quarterbacks look like. The Packers have a big quarterback number. It's getting bigger with Jordan Love and that contract that he's in. The Jets just got out of that. So, the Jets are, I suppose, kind of starting over in that sense as well. So there is some of it there. The Rams have a big quarterback number with Matthew Stafford. So it's probably better if you're going to do a study of this to say, let's look at this over 5 years. But the Wilfs are they've been consistently willing to say, they talk all the time about we want to be super competitive. And I think part of the reason for that is they've said, we will spare no expense, to borrow a phrase from Jurassic Park, to put the best team on the field that we think can win this year and be successful this year. So it is interesting to see how this goes, because, as I thought about this too, okay, those 4 teams that are at the bottom of actual cash spend this year, one is the Packers. So the ownership is different than anybody else in the NFL, but it's a team with a national brand. It's a team that has a, decades long season ticket list. The other 3 are owned by Paul Allen's family. Paul Allen Microsoft, not Paul Allen K-Fan. Paul Allen K-Fan, my apologies to Paul Allen K-Fan, but he's not making Paul Allen Microsoft money. The Allen family, Stan Kroenke, who's got a lot of money, and Woody Johnson, who is heir to the Johnson & Johnson fortune that has been in the news at some times with his former quarterback, speaking of Aaron Rodgers, over the years. So those are not owners that are at the bottom of the net worth scale. The Wilfs are actually a lot closer to the bottom of this, at least by most estimates. This is not something that we know with 100% certainty at any time, and nobody is pinching pennies. I mean, let's be very clear. Everybody's making a lot of money, and it's just a matter of how much you want to dip into your profits. But it is interesting if some of these owners, Mark Davis would be the other one I think about, is he saying, hey, I don't have as much money as all these other guys. I want to have a team that can compete. And if we're going to have a league that's built on parity, that's built on everybody has a chance, I wonder if some of these owners are saying that's changing. And I think a lot of it's probably just, I want to keep my money. So we could say that's not good for the game. We could say that's not good for the health of it. But the people that get in that room that make those decisions may not care about that all the time uniformly. There may be different opinions on how much of their profits from a business they own they want to put into these things. So right, wrong, and different, that's probably where some of this conversation is coming from.
You can get all of that again in written form, which I know for me will be more digestible than the audio format, but you can get it all written out in the
Emily's bored with me.
The money talk glazes my eyes over a little bit when I read it, I process it. But when we talk about it gets a little like, money is a concept, but you can read about it, luckily, in the Access Vikings newsletter, which Ben has links to subscribe to up on his social media accounts, which is probably the easiest place to find the subscribe link. You can also read all the rest of our stories on thestartribune.com. We will be out at the UNRL celebrity softball game hosted by CJ Ham Thursday night, so look for content from that, most likely just on socials, but fun videos. I hear Andrew DePaula is a killer home run, is probably going to kill the home run derby. So I'm excited to see that.
I didn't even realize I was doing all the baseball stuff on the day of this celebrity softball game.
You're already in the mood, Ben. You're ready to go.
Man, I'm dialed in.
But lots of guys are going to be out there. Lots of the new guys, J.J. McCarthy. So we'll be out there getting content, chatting it up with them and stuff like that. So thanks for watching this episode of the podcast or listening to it, whichever way you consume Access Vikings. And we will talk to you again soon. Yeah, we needed you last episode, Ben, when we were hypothesizing about halftime shows for the Christmas Day game. I don't think we did a very good job.
I don't know who. I mean, it always seems like up here, if there's local ties, I mean, there aren't any anymore because the main one is dead. And the other one is classic enough that probably won't do it, and he's old.
That's true.
So
we did mention
Timothy
Bruce.
Chalamet will do it.
Timothy Chalamet as Bruce halftime show, I would go insane.
As Bob Dylan. Oh, Bob Dylan.
Or as Bob Dylan. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah. Bob Dylan doesn't really make halftime show music. Doesn't really associate with Minnesota that much these days.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know. I don't know who we'll get.